husband. Ruth tried to picture her mother's face for a moment and felt a pang of sorrow at how hard it was to do so. 10 years was a long time. The water she had put on to boil for the morning brew began to simmer, shaking Ruth out of her memories, and she promptly took the pot off the flame. She didn't like it when the chicory roots boiled too long in the water, best just to bring them up to a boil from cold, or else the drink was too bitter. Ruth was fussy about this. Most of the folks in the village made a brew of dried bits of Mongolwurzel, but she wouldn't let the stuff into her kitchen. She'd rather drink plain water than that swill. Of course, she liked to drink real coffee most of all, but often they couldn't afford enough beans to last the week. Johanna went to Sonneberg every Friday to sell the glass that they made that week, and she always brought back a little bag of coffee beans. Joost Steinmann didn't much care what he put in his cup to drink, as long as it was dark and hot, but he didn't deny his daughters this little luxury. It had become something of a ritual by now. When Johanna came back from Sonneberg, they would treat themselves to coffee and a slice of cake, and a pickled herring that she would buy in town as well. The rest of the village gossiped about these habits of theirs and said that in Joost Steinmann's house the women ruled the roost. But it wasn't as though they did whatever they pleased. Certainly within their own four walls, the girls were allowed their own way much more than others of their age. But when it came to sheltering them from the wicked ways of the world, Joost could be worse than a mother hen. What if the village choir was rehearsing and they wanted to join in the singing? Out of the question. There might be boys lurking around the streets as they walked back home. And a dance on the night of the solstice? There was no point even asking if they could go. A few years back, some of the village girls had gotten together and started a spinning group for the winter, but Joost wouldn't even let his daughters join in this bit of harmless fun. "You'll slip and fall on the ice on your way home and break a leg," he had declared. "Better to stay home and practice your letters." As if books were as enjoyable as a good chat. Ruth swallowed. The gatherings were set to begin again in November, and the other girls would all be sitting at the spinning wheels 2 evenings a week, while she and her sister sat at home. By the time the spinning circle broke up and the girls walked home through the alleys, laughing, throwing snowballs, and shrieking at the boys chasing them, Ruth, Johanna, and Marie would already be in bed. It was no wonder that all the boys in the village had gotten the idea that Joost didn't want them paying court to his daughters. The way he looked at any boy who came calling stopped most of them from ever coming a second time. Ruth went to the table and opened the drawer to fetch out the little mirror she kept there. When she held it out at arm's length, she could see her whole face in it. She was a beauty, and she knew it. She and her sisters had all inherited their mother's fine, even features, and their mother had been an exceptionally beautiful woman. Ruth heaved a sigh and put the mirror back in the drawer again. What good did it do her to look in the mirror and see a pretty face? Would a man ever kiss her on the lips? Would anyone ever tell her that her eyes shone like amber? That her skin was as clear as a spring morning? If Joost had his way, all 3 of them would die old maids. The only man who regularly came to call was their neighbor, Peter Mayenbaum. Ever since his parents had died a few years ago, one soon after the other, Joost had looked on him as a son, never thinking that he too might turn into a skirt chaser. But judging from the way he gazed at Johanna, Ruth was quite sure that Peter had had his eye on her for some time now. Nobody else seemed to have noticed, though, least of all Johanna. Ruth sighed again, more deeply this time. If a man ever looked at her like that, she would certainly notice. "Johanna's barging about the house again like a bear with a sore head. When she finally makes it out of bed, she spends the rest of the day giving us orders," Marie said, slipping onto the edge of the bench. She was so slim